Extra, extra, think all about it. Extra, extra, think all about it. Every child in the United States of America deserves to read and rise. And not just in the United States of America's communities as eyes. Every child in the United States of America deserves to read and rise. To be successful in this 21st century world and thrive, every child in the United States of America deserves to read and rise. And not read to just get by, but read to really have a chance at their 21st century piece of the pie. So we've come back to my home today to talk about ways that we can help every child in America become great. Every child in America deserves a chance to be great. Every child in America deserves to read and rise. I want to welcome you again today on Friday, April the 3rd, 2020, to the Robinson Resident. We are in my office here at my home. My name is John Robinson. I am the Director of Education for the Houston Area Urban League, and I also work for Scholastic Books as a national consultant, executive consultant, as well as a keynote and facilitator of a number of their solutions. On today, we're going to continue our series around parent caregivers understanding how to actually facilitate a read aloud, what we call a read aloud, but the definition of a read aloud is not complete until we add text talk. So we're going to talk today about how parents and caregivers with kids 4th through 6th grade facilitates a read aloud plus text talk in their home. And every day, parents, caregivers, you ought to be facilitating read alouds with your children 4th through 6th grade. Whether you're reading to them or they're reading to you, there are some objectives in the read aloud for 4th through 6th graders that we ought to accomplish, we ought to achieve in every single read aloud plus text talk. And I want to share those objectives with you. We talked last Friday about parents and caregivers who had kids pre-K through 4th grade, pre-K through 3rd grade, and we gave you 4 objectives for that. Now I want to add on to those objectives. Those 4, vocabulary, defining vocabulary, and making sure you find story starters and you have a writing prompt and an activity are good for kids pre-K through 12th grade. But for 4th through 6th grade, I want to add some objectives for you parents who have kids in this age bracket. Now, I consider this age bracket, 4th through 6th grade, to be the critical years. The critical years. Why? Because our kids are beginning to build on their voice, their vision, and their identity. Our kids are building their literary voices, their visions, and their identities. And so we need to make sure that they're able to achieve these objectives as they read text. As we do read alouds plus text talks with them, these are objectives parents you need to make sure, caregivers you need to make sure that your kids are able to achieve. First objective for these 4th through 6th graders is we want to make sure we begin to stretch their vocabulary. When I say stretch their vocabulary, I'm simply talking about engaging your child, parents, caregivers, engaging your child to the edge of their speaking ability. I'm talking about stretching their vocabulary to places they didn't know that they could go. So we want to begin to stretch their vocabularies. Objective number 1. The second objectives, parents and caregivers, you want to make sure that you start to show your kids how to mark the text that they're reading. The read aloud plus text talk. Marking the text. In other words, we want to make sure that there are statements in the text that when your kid agrees with that statement, they mark a little A to suggest that that's a statement in the text that they agree with. But by the same token, we want them to also be able to mark pieces of text that they are statements in the text that they may not agree with, that they disagree with. So by those pieces of text statements, you want them to put a DS for a DA for disagree. And also, one of the things that they can also do, parents, caregivers, is they can mark statements in the text that makes sense to them by simply putting just a little small MS. Or they can also mark statements in the text that don't make sense to them. DMS, doesn't make sense. I would encourage you to have them use a pencil, because we want to be able to erase those marks in the text, because we don't want to give somebody a textbook or a book that we're going to share with marks all in it. So make sure they mark those text decisions of agreeing and disagreeing in pencil. The third objective is what I call an inquiry approach. Parents, you should use you should use an inquiry approach. Now, it may take your kid time to get used to this, because they're not maybe used to you asking the question continually to them. What do you think? How do you feel? What did that make you feel like? What did you think about that word? What did you think about that statement? How did you feel about that statement? What emotional feelings do you have about that statement? The inquiry approach, continually asking to your kids as you go through the reading or doing the discussion, what do you think? What do you think? We want kids to begin to believe that they are thinkers, and you giving them a chance to express what they think all along the way, and you being silent and just validating whatever thoughts that they have at that point it's a sure recipe for kids to begin to build confidence in their ability to critically think, to begin to build comfortability to talk to you and tell you what they think and anyone else about what they think, and also to be creative in their thinking process, in their critical thinking. So we want to begin to use an inquiry approach with kids 4th through 6th grade. We want to begin to stretch these kids. They're ready to move forward. Let's not hold them back. Let's begin to stretch them. Let's use the inquiry approach. Then number 4, we want to be able to invite controversy. Now, when I say invite controversy, here's what I mean. I believe, parents, that you ought to look for texts. Look for texts that have different answers, that present different multiple situations where kids have to give different answers. Give kids a chance to feel empowered to share their responses, to share their thoughts, their opinions, their ideas, and their positions about a number of different kinds of texts that may be debatable, that have different meanings, that have different answers. So parents, caregivers, I'm encouraging you to find texts that will stretch your kid, that will have your kid to have an inquiry approach of constantly giving you responses about what they feel about a text, and inviting controversy. And then finally, I want to encourage you to continually and always work at fostering with your kid a healthy discourse, helping your kid to understand how to have a respectful discussion, how to have a respectful discourse with someone, whether they agree or not. How to have a respectful discourse, how to actually foster that in your home is the beginning of raising a great child, a great debater, a child who is really ready to go out into society and present their voice, their vision, and their identity. So, having said those now, I want you to understand I am going to read today a read aloud from the Scholastic solution called ID. Now, understand that ID is designed for high schoolers, but I believe it's time for us to begin to stretch our kids early. We need to stop waiting too late to start stretching our kids, showing our kids that we believe in them, and raising the bar so that they can handle texts that may seem to be out of reach. So as I come around, I want to share with you a little bit about the text that I'm going to read today. And I want you, parents, caregivers, to understand where I'm going with this. This solution called ID is a Scholastic solution that's built around 4 platforms: defining self, becoming resilient, engaging others, and then finally building capacity. I believe every kid in America, 4th through 6th grade ought to be exposed to Scholastic ID. I believe ID is a recipe for success. And I'll show you why. Because when you get into the reading of these texts, like the one that I selected to read to you today, called CHOP, these texts stretch our kids. They are texts that are common to our kids' concerns. And we ought to find texts that are common to our kids' own concerns. Not just read anything to them, but texts that are relevant to them, that make them think, that make them want to have something to say about what's going on in the world around them. Now, in this particular text that I'm going to read to you today, called CHOP, the author of this text is Dr. Alfred Tatum. Now, Dr. Tatum is actually the author of the ID solution. And in this particular text, he discusses the ways personal identity and self-worth can erode for our children by the particular experiences that our children have in their everyday walks of life, with individuals, with society itself, even with family members. He talks about how personal identity and self-worth can be eroded because of those experiences. And what I want you to do, parents, caregivers, as I read this text to you, I want you to look at how you would prepare, once you hear this text, how you would prepare a Read Aloud Plus text talk for your child, how you would analyze the vocabulary words in a text that's this advanced for 4th through 6th graders. But understand me, I think 4th through 6th graders should begin to engage around texts like this. And believe me, ID and 4th through 6th graders is all about engagement, putting text in front of them. So listen to this text called CHOP and begin to think about questions you could ask your child about the words that are used in this poem called CHOP and the thoughts that come to your mind when you read aloud a poem like this. Listen to the poem. The poem is called CHOP, and it goes like this. It says, I came into this world whole, and look what happened to me. This is not about a pork chop or a lamb chop. This is about a chop chop. You see, when I extend my hand and you do not shake it, chop chop. When I say something, you do not like the way it sounds, chop chop. When I wear my pants a certain way and it causes you to frown, chop chop. When I read like I need help and you blame it on me instead of helping me, chop chop. When I make an adolescent mistake in your presence and you cast me away, chop chop. When you start that anecdotal record that grants me entry into that special type of education without putting my voice on record, chop chop. When you begin to dislike me and believe that I am dislikable, chop chop. When you say that I do not love who I am because you have not found a way to love me, chop chop. And I would be stopping all along the way. And I would be asking my kids, parents and caregivers, how do you feel about the author continuing to use the emotional phrases here in this text, chop chop? How does that make you feel? What does that make you think about when you hear that those words repeated, that verb repeated over and over and over again, chop chop? Back to the point. It says, when you leave me alone and this cycle starts all over again, chop chop. When you cage me up, chop, chop. When you lock me out, chop, chop. When you leave me out there on my own, chop, chop. When you bury me too early, stop, stop. How does that make you feel? Son, how does that make you feel? Those two verbs, stop, stop. The author's use of that, stop, stop. How does that make you feel? Tell me what you're thinking about right now. Parents, caregivers, I would be questioning my child. Let me finish the reading. There is no more chopping, the poem says, because I've been chopped up. I came into this world whole, and look what happened to me. Chop, chop. Wow. Powerful words, parents. Powerful poem. And I do realize that this is a more advanced type poem for boys and girls 4th through 6th grade. But again, I don't believe that. I believe that we need to begin to raise the standard for our kids. So this is a poem that I believe 4th graders all the way through 12th graders should be exposed to discuss how they feel about what went on in this poem. Being able to analyze, parents, some of the vocabulary, calling attention to the use of vivid verbs. Ask your child from this poem, what other verbs could have been used to say the same thing? What else could have been said instead of chop, chop to say the same thing? What else could have been used when you heard the word stop, stop, that could have said the same thing in the poem? Get them thinking, stretching their vocabulary. So parents, as I would discuss this poem with my kids, I would talk about how the negative experiences and the confrontations that we heard in this poem can tear away at a child's identity. And so I would ask my child from this read aloud plus text talk, which device, stretching the vocabulary, which device or incident, in other words, described in this poem grabbed you? Using another word, grabbed you, meaning that got your attention the most. Which of the devices, the incidents, grabbed you, got your attention the most? I would have those discussions with my kids around CHOP and just give them a chance to express themselves and validating their expressions and making sure that you build their confidence and their comfort level to have a discussion like this with you, making sure that you allow them to be controversial in their expressions, but appropriate. And so in the end, the activity, parents, caregivers, that I would do with this is I would talk to my kid about their own identity, about defining themselves and not allowing other folk to define them, but them being able to define themselves for themselves. And I would pose the question to them at the end as a writing prompt. It would be an essential question that I would ask them to write about and answer for me as the activity so that I could make sure we get them writing about their feelings, putting it on paper. And I would say to them, can you use writing, talking to my child, talking to your child, parent, caregiver, can you use writing to define who you are? After hearing all of those negatives, can you use writing to define who you are? I would give my child a chance to do that. But before we started, here's some of the things that we should be practicing at home with our kids in terms of the components and the attributes, parents and caregivers, concerning writing. Our kids need to learn how to write from read alouds plus text discussions. That's what they're all about, is having a read aloud and a text discussion or text talk. At the end, we want to make sure there is a writing prompt for our kids to be able to write. We want to have maybe an activity that can bring the whole thing to life. But here's one of the things I want to share with you that we need to make sure our kids understand about writing. There are components and attributes of writing that we need to make sure our kids are mastering at home. And you can work on this now that you have all of this time with your kids during this crisis period. So let me just share some of them with you. Number one, you want to make sure that your kid understands how to organize the events that they're going to place into their writing and the ideas. They can brainstorm and put events and ideas on paper about the planning of their writing. Number two, we want to make sure that they understand how important it is to be able to keep the reader's interest and keep the momentum about what the reader is going to read about their writing. We want to make sure in our kids putting their voice, their vision, and their identity on the record, we want to make sure that people receives what they say as authentic, that their authenticity comes out in expressing themselves. And so you want to make sure that you help them to understand the importance of interest and momentum in their writing. Then we want to make sure that they understand that every piece of writing that they do, 4th through 6th grade, has a time and a place. The setting is always an important component, attribute of the writing. And then parents and caregivers, you want to make sure you work on at home the authenticity of them making their story believable. The character in their story, whether it's them and they add others, you want to make sure that it's authentic, that it's believable. And so we want to make sure in making their story authentic, they take particular care about how they design the details of what they want to write, how they structure the sentences in what they are going to use to express their authenticity, their voice, their vision, and their identity. And so in having the details like they want them, it's going to require in this final objective, making sure they understand the importance of word choice and tone, how word choices and the tone they use and choose reveals how they really feel about what it is that they are writing. We want to make sure that every child, grades 4 through 6, are building their voice, their vision, and their identity around literacy that is common to their concerns. You think about that. Common to their own concerns. We surely will get them engaged and involved in writing, in reading and writing, in reading and comprehending what they read, critically thinking about what they read, being able to discuss what they read, to write about what they read, and then being able to stand before an audience and put their voice on record. So as you think through the Read Aloud plus Text Talk today from CHOP for kids 4th through 6th grade, also think about the objectives in completing the Read Aloud. And you can use any text that you desire to use that is you deem common to the concerns of your child, that draws their interest, that motivates them to want to read about things that concern them, and use these objectives in making sure that it happens. And when you get those beautiful writings, completions of writings from your kids, you ought to post them all over your walls. And your wall ought to be filled every single day with a Read Aloud plus Text Talk option and a writing, raw writing that your child provided on how they felt about the Read Aloud plus Text Talk that you provided and facilitated. So parents and caregivers, you are in fact your child's first and most important educator and role model. And we are given time through this crisis to spend time to rebuild our relationships with our kids, retake our place as our kids' first and most important educator and role model. And I encourage you to lead in your home and help your kids to become great readers and great comprehenders and great critical thinkers and great discussion, having great discussions about what they read, being able to write about they read, and then standing before an audience and becoming orators, being able to respond to what it is that they have learned and believed from the writing. Parents, again, you're your child's first teacher, and everything that you do academically, socially, and emotionally with your child is all about you, the parent, but it's not about you. I want to encourage you to read with your child, to help your child to become great, to help your child be ready to be college bound, corporate bound, and community sound. That's college, work, and life. College bound, corporate bound, and community sound. I want to thank you for tuning in today. We'll be back on next Friday with a parent caregiver read aloud for young people grades 7 and 8. And then the following Friday with a read aloud plus text talk for parents and caregivers with kids grades 9 through 12. Thank you for joining us today. I'm John Robinson with the Houston Area Urban League. Good day.